All right. We're live, everyone. Welcome to this day. I want to say this evening session. It is evening, so I can say this evening session, where Rufus and I are going to be chatting about startup buzzwords. So, as many of you may know, I wrote the book on startup buzzwords. So I know, I know a buzzword or two. I hope he doesn't ask me any buzzwords that I don't know, to be honest. All right, Rufus is going to join the session now. So here we go. View request. Go live with Rufus Tangen. Here he is. He's joining. We're doing this double, IGTV live and on YouTube. So fingers crossed it all works out. Here we go. Let's do it. Rufus, you joining in, my boy?
Yes.
Welcome to the live session. Here he is.
Thank you. Are you live on YouTube as well now?
We are live on YouTube and obviously on the session here too. I'm going to make sure that everyone can see us. All right. So everyone, as always, feel free to ask questions should you need. And go crazy. Ask all the questions that you want. All right, so Rufus, what do you have for me, buddy? Fill me in. What's the plan today?
Okay, give me 1 second because I'm setting up here and because I had some Wi-Fi trouble, but it's all good now, I think.
Hey,
okay.
Ruth?
Yeah. Do you hear me?
I lost you. Now I can hear you. I lost you.
Yes, perfect.
You're back. What are we talking about? Fill me in.
Awesome. So what I want to talk about today is you're the buzzword king when it comes to it. You also wrote a book called Buzzwords.
I did, right. I wrote the book on it.
Yes. And I think so many people has questions like, okay, it's a buzzword, it means that, but can you go more into depth, like what it means? So I personally picked out some words, and if other people have some buzzwords they want to know more about and what the meaning behind it and go more into depth, what it actually means, you're the perfect to answer that. So what I want to start with.
Don't ask me any tough ones. I should probably get my my book notes up, right? When I wrote the book, I did all these different buzzwords. Anyway, all right, what's up? Hit me. And hey, if anyone has any fun ones, write them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them as well.
Absolutely. So the first one I want to take up is runway. The buzzword runway.
Yeah. Okay. Runway is a good one. The startup buzzword runway, everyone, means simply like a runway. You have a length that a plane or a rocket ship, because in the startup industry we like to use the terminology a rocket ship for these kind of things, right? So if you imagine a rocket ship taking off, I know rockets take off like this actually, so that's probably a bad analogy, but imagine a plane taking off then, right? The runway is how long it needs to run, and then it takes off, right? And if it runs at a runway, it'll crash, right? So using that metaphor, your runway is basically how long your company on a monthly basis can survive with its current cash burn on a monthly basis, without new revenue or without new funding. So I'll give you an example, Rufus, and anyone listening to this one. If you have $50,000 in the bank at the company and you spend $10,000 a month, your runway is 5 months, right? Simple. If you have $1 million in the bank and you're spending $1 million a month, you have a 1 month runway. So your runway is how long, and typically in how many months you can survive on the cash that you have in the bank at the moment with no new revenue and no new funding, basically. That's runway.
Okay.
Simple.
So burn rate is the same buzzword as a runway almost?
No. So burn rate is your burn rate is how much money you burn per month, right? So your burn rate is basically if you have your burn rate is 10,000. If you have 50,000 in the bank and you're burning 10,000 a month, your burn rate is $10,000. So what's your burn rate on average? It's not your burn will fluctuate typically throughout a year, right? Obviously, as you add new employees, you'll spend more on marketing, but ultimately your burn rate is the amount of money you spend per month on average on money. So say, for example, you spent $10,000 a month. Over the last 6 months, you on average spent $10,000. That's your burn rate. Your burn rate is how much you spend per month on costs.
Okay, and next question is, how do you calculate your runway and burn rate?
It's simply by how much cash you have in a bank, right? So say you have $50,000 in the bank and you are spending 10,000 a month. That's your burn rate. Your burn rate is 10,000 a month on average. So now you've worked out what your burn rate is. And typically these things fluctuate, but obviously within a 10 or 20% window, right? So you average it out typically over a 3 to 6 month period, your burn rate over a 3 to 6 month period. Obviously some bills come in at different days, different months, and some costs they have to be allocated different days and different months as well. So you figure out the burn rate. It's the average cash you spend per month. That is how you figure out the runway. So if you're spending on average $10,000 a month and you have exactly 50,000 in the bank, your runway is 5 months, right? It's 10,000 a month minus, that takes you 5 months to burn all that cash away, right? So that's simply how burn rate is calculated and how runway is calculated based on burn rate.
Okay, so it sounds pretty simple.
It's pretty simple. No, it's super simple.
Yeah. But many people almost like maybe forgets like all the taxes that comes to it and employee taxes, all the details into it. But
so actually, how to calculate your burn? Now this is okay. Now I get where you're getting at, Rufus. Now how to calculate a burn, right? So I mean, it's a cost structure, right? So you can do things on a gross burn, like your gross burn rate is all the costs per month, but when I'm talking about if a company's making revenue, now obviously in the early stages of a business, you typically aren't generating revenue. Your only income source is effectively not income, it's fundraising. So you say you got $50,000 in the bank, you're spending 10,000 a month. Now, how that 10,000 is called a net burn. That's the net burn because there's no income coming in. Because you could be making some money every single month, but your net burn is 10,000 because your actual burn is 20,000. Your gross burn, which is the top number, which is all the costs added up, is 20,000, but you're making 10,000. So if you make 10,000, your gross burn is 20, but your net burn is 10K because obviously you're generating 10K in revenue, right? So and obviously how a company meets equilibrium or profitability, as it's called, is when your gross burn is less than the amount of money you bring in per month. So flip that example around. If you're making 20,000 a month and your gross burn is 10K, you have a free cash flow positive of 10K a month, right? So you're making 10K a month because your costs are greater. So your revenue is greater than your costs, right? Simple business school, metrics, but
plus minus.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the next buzzword I find pretty interesting is stealth mode.
Stealth mode. This is a fun one. It's a sexy one, right? Stealth mode. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, in the startup industry, we like to play around with aviation and aircraft terminology, don't we? It's actually kind of funny. We totally do. It's all like stealth modes and growth and all that kind of stuff, right? So stealth mode is basically when you are building. So why would a company be in stealth mode, right? So it's if you are, so Rufus and I, if you and I, or anyone on this call right now, and any of us on the lives started a company tomorrow in fintech, right? And we have this like brilliant idea that we're going to completely capture the industry. We believe we're the first people doing this, or we know that other people are doing what we're doing, but we don't want them to see what we're doing. So it's basically where you develop your product under the radar. Like you don't go public. Like, startup people tend to go, I've started a business. I'm the founder and CEO of this company. Basically, stealth mode is like, you don't tell anyone, maybe just your families and friends, that you're developing this software or this company or this product. You don't tell anyone else. You don't go public about it. You stay completely under the radar, stealth, until you're ready to launch. And, companies raise, a good example of stealth mode is Apple with, when they release the phones. Like we know roughly that in October, they're going to release a new phone. But actually in reality, they're in stealth mode, right? No one knows what they're going to release. No one knows the features. That's stealth mode. And the reason for that is that it's how to stay competitive, to beat your competitors and develop something. And that's basically stealth mode, right? So, and why you would do that is basically to beat someone to market. And also if you're developing something that is going to capitalize on some change in industry or legislation, that's a good time to be in stealth mode, basically. So that's stealth mode.
Okay. I find it a little bit interesting because you can see the correlation of like, it's totally understanding that Apple doesn't want to like release their news before a specific date to build up like the tension around it. But it also convert over to like normal people that has business ideas and they don't want to like go out and tell other people about their idea.
Rufus, let me burst the bubble for you, mate. Let me burst the bubble for anyone who's watching this on YouTube or IGTV. no one is going to steal your idea. This is such an age-old rhetoric that we get taught through by media, because media conditions us that, you know, someone's going to steal your idea. The Social Network is all about Mark Zuckerberg stealing the Facebook idea from the Winklevoss brothers, right? There are so many stories of founders, you know, in the press of ideas being stolen or copied, right? The reality is you get absolutely zero credit for having an idea. You get credit for taking action, because the difference between an entrepreneur and idealist, we're all idealists. Everyone has ideas. We all have great ideas. Trust me, everyone has great ideas. You're no different. You're no different. Rufus and I are no different. The only difference between an idealist and an entrepreneur is action and execution, right? So if you have an idea, the same idea as someone else, you haven't copied it, but if you've executed on it, then that's your concept. You deserve to own that concept, right? So that's why some, you know, I don't want to burst that bubble to anyone who thinks that someone's going to steal their idea. Trust me, no one's going to steal your idea. And if it's that easy to steal, and if you're not that fantastic for the idea, then ultimately, you know, maybe it's not the right idea for you. Maybe it's not that fantastic of an idea, right?
Yeah, and maybe you're doing in your way. No one can like steal your touch on a product that you're making.
Exactly, Rufus. Well said.
So, okay, stealth mode, perfect. Good explanation. Next one is tribe.
Tribe. Okay, this is again using the Apple example, right? Like, you know, Apple has built a consumer culture where people will, you know, buy the new product when it comes out after the last one came out 6 months ago, and because, you know, like I'm on IGTV, I'm on an iPhone. On my computer, I'm on a MacBook Pro. I've got my other MacBook Pro here. You know, the bottom line really comes down to the fact that you build a consumer culture where people buy into. Now, a tribe can also be a culture of employees, right? You have some startups that, and actually the startup industry has been fantastic at this, right? What they've done is they've managed to make individuals eat, breathe, sleep the company, right? They die for the company, yeah. Right? Like they walk around in company branded clothing, and that's a tribe. Basically, it's a group of people that you are developing a common goal. You know, you're working towards a common goal, and that common goal can be simply building a brand, building a company, or you're an Apple versus Android. That's a good example of real existing relevant tribes in society.
Okay, so it's basically like if you're a football fan or something like that. It's
exactly
the
same
terms.
Exactly. Okay. That's a very good analogy, Rufus. It's your tribe. It's your football club. You know, you're in the Android or you're in the iOS club. You're in the Uber or the Bolt club, right? And ultimately, all these companies are trying to convince you to buy into their brand, right? That's why building a brand today has never been more important, because there is so much white noise out there. So many companies trying to compete against one another. They all have really similar offerings. Now, what's the only differentiating factor? Because you downloaded their app first and they gave you a freebie, because you have, you know, you're starting to build a credit system. That's why reward systems and credit systems are so valuable, to build LTV, lifetime value of a customer, building that brand recognition, that brand awareness. I'm an Apple user. All my products are Apple. So, I mean, I'm in that Apple tribe. I bought into their culture. I bought into their brand.
Okay, nice, thanks. The last one is convertibility. Convertible.
Convertible, no. There's a great comment from Let's Talk About Sex, Jamie. Damn, I love that. If you don't act on it effectively, it's not your idea no more. It's very true. Unless you take action on that concept, you know, you can walk around and tell everyone, oh, you know, I had the idea for Twitter. I had the idea for Facebook. Yeah, but I mean, did you do anything about it? No, but it was my idea. Well, you know, I don't think you can claim that, my friend, unless you told that person and then they ran off and hid away like the movie, which is so unrealistic and so unlikely anyway. Anyway, Rufus, convertible. This is a fun startup buzzword. There's also a fun cartoon in my book about the startup buzzword. Now, the startup buzzword of convertible is basically in reference to a way that you can Shia LaBeouf, just do it. I love it. If you're raising money, there are different ways to raise money, right? So I won't get too much into detail now, because that's a whole nother conversation, Rufus, between a convertible note and an equity investment. Now, if you are an early stage company and you're raising money, right? Like, how do you value the company? It's so difficult, right? Because you're like, well, you know, we have no revenue, we have no customers, maybe we have a product and we're going to raise some money. Say we want to raise $100,000. How do you value that company? It's so difficult, right? So a financial metric was invented called the SAFE note, SAFE, or a convertible note. And what it simply is instead of putting a valuation on the company in order to figure out how much equity, how many shares the investors will get for 100,000, because you could be you're a 6 months old company and you're raising $100,000, right? You tell the investors that they're going to get 10%, valuing the company at basically 900,000, a million after the investment, pre-money versus post-money. Another lecture on that one we could do. But the reality of it is, you say the company is worth 1 million, the investor says it's worth 100,000, and they want to give you 100,000. So, effectively they'll buy 50% for the 200,000 worth of a company. Bottom line is, who's right? You or the investor? You don't want to give away 50% of the company. That's unfair for you at the early days to give away so much of the company. But also the investor shouldn't be investing at like millions and millions and millions of dollars of of a company that's not worth anything technically yet. So you do a convertible note. What it is the investor gives you the 100,000 today. You don't give them shares. You write a contract, which basically says this 100,000 is sort of like seen as a debt in the company. It's not a loan. It's called a convertible loan. But at the next funding round, when you are in 1 year's time or something like that, when the company's actually got some metrics to be valued on, when the new investors come in, you convert that 100,000 debt today to shares tomorrow. So I always describe a convertible note, a convertible investment, as debt today, shares tomorrow. That tomorrow will come in a 3 to 5 year time frame, typically within 18 months or so. And what it simply means is that you don't have to try and place a value on an almost invaluable company to this day. You put the conversation forward a couple of months or years, and then everyone converts. And then obviously as a deal sweetener, you add a little bit of interest to that, typically LIBOR, London Interbank Offer Rate, or NIBOR, the Norwegian Interbank Offer Rate, of plus 3% or something. So it's a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8% interest on that on a yearly basis, which accrues. You don't pay anything. It just adds to the value. And then that will convert to the value of the business and how many shares you get at a later time, basically. Plus a discount typically, but then that's technical. That's a convertible note, Rufus.
Okay. I definitely feel I want a follow-up on that sometimes, because it's a lot of information packed on a short time.
No worries.
But when it comes to like the valuation, I know it's a different ball game, but for me it seems to be like, especially for tech companies, it seems to be that the valuation is built up on a story. It's like a hope. It's like a ticket lottery. Like, will this win or not? It's no real value there. So I've always been curious, like, how do people fund actually startup tech companies? And a convertible is a good options for that.
It means you have to talk about valuation today. It's so hard to find a valuation of a business. So, exactly, until the business has been running, it has some metrics, some KPIs, it has some something that you can compare it against, right? Then it's almost impossible to value a business. True.
Do you have any buzzwords that I have not brought up that you really enjoyed, like speaking about?
Good question. Do you know what a dragon is?
No, what's a dragon?
Have you heard of a dragon? It's a unicorn. Is an unlisted startup that achieved a valuation over 1 billion based on funds raised, whereas a dragon is a startup that's raised 1 billion from investors in a single round. So it's when a startup has raised 1 billion in a single round. So like, Uber, all these companies, they're all dragons because they're companies that, unicorn is a company that's worth 1 billion. A dragon has raised 1 billion in a single round.
Wow, that's huge. It seems a unicorn term is pretty normal these days, at least when you read the newspapers. I know it's not normal for the most common guy, but it's so many like news stories every day, and it seems to be more and more of them as we go.
Yeah, and, was that a question or a statement? Come on, no, Rufus. Are you making a statement or a question? Come on, boy, this is Q&A time. I'm just kidding.
But have the audience any buzzword or questions to us? It can be.
Yes, with a question, we will answer this for you. I'll throw while you're thinking about questions, everyone. I will throw one more out. Have you ever heard of brain rape?
No, what's that?
Brain rape is when a big company pretends to want to acquire a small company, and they go through the due diligence process to steal all their technical data and information. So they pretend they're going to acquire the company, meaning that they have to go through due diligence and get and things like that. And then obviously they never actually acquire the company, meaning that the company goes through this fake acquisition process and gives away all their secrets. Uche, can you talk about a pivot? What's your favorite examples for that? Okay, I'll give you a great example, Usha. A great example of a pivot is YouTube, because we're live streaming to YouTube and Facebook right now. YouTube was started out as a dating website. Basically, they were where you could upload dating profiles, and then they pivoted to realizing that you could upload anything. Right, that's a good example of a pivot. Another great example of a big pivot is I used to have a few good examples actually. I think there's some in the book, but yeah, a pivot is basically when you decide to change the business industry focus. So you could be focused on like YouTube dating, and then you decide to go, let's put videos and streaming as our focus. But it can also be like business model. You think you're like, you start selling to businesses and you realize you should actually sell to customers, B2C instead of B2B. That's a pivot. So a pivot is fundamentally when you change direction as a core business or as a as your value proposition as well. Your product can pivot too.
That's true. I want to add one in there because you hear it so often. MVP.
Minimum viable products.
Yeah.
Minimum viable products. Yeah.
And what does that mean?
So that simply means the most minimum viable version of your product. What is viable? Good question. Viable is basically a product that you can hand over to someone to be tested. So it's basically you can hand it over to some beta group. It's basically a group of people you're going to test with. They can be family and friends, they can be potential customers, and you basically hand them over and admit them. It's the most basic product that you're willing to hand over to someone to test. So like it might not be as very pretty, it might not have all the functionality, but you hand it over to people to test out. Firstly, like is it something that they could potentially want to use to pay for, and etc. So it's very important to do an MVP, because you figure out before because the more MVPs and the more beta tests you do, you're less likely to pivot later, because you're more likely to find out a winning solution for your product service sooner, as opposed to having to pivot later, basically.
Is it the same as a beta test?
So a beta test is the process of testing an MVP, right? A beta test is the process of testing a product. A beta test is a group of people, which is closed beta, meaning that everybody, it's not public, or you can do an open beta, a public beta where you test with people publicly. So you could release your app on the App Store. You could publish your app. An MVP version, you just don't you don't try to market it too much, and you let some people download it and get feedback. Or you can do a controlled beta group, but a beta test is testing an MVP.
Okay, I want to have one last buzzword I'm wondering about. Bridge. What is bridge?
Bridge is a good one. So bridge is basically in reference to bridging a gap. Now, what gap are we bridging? In the most instances, bridging a funding round. So for example, we spoke earlier about Runway, right? Say right now I had $50,000 in the bank and I'm in the process of fundraising, and my burn rate is $20,000 a month, which means that my runway is 2.5 months. But you could say that I'm in the process of a funding round where I'm going to raise $1 million, right? But that I'm only going to get the money in 3 months' time, meaning that I have a 2-week gap of no money. I can't pay bills, I can't do anything, right? So the company effectively could go bankrupt, and this happens. Companies go bankrupt before they can actually close a funding round, right? So what you can do is, if you're lucky enough to have some investors on your cap table who are willing to give you some cash to bridge the gap, what they'll do is they'll give you that $25,000 or whatever it is to bridge the gap, the funding gap. And that can be worked into the investment, or you can even do that with your new investors. They can maybe give you an initial tranche of that fundraising a little bit earlier to cover the bridge, because they believe in the business. They realize this is the reality of businesses. Sometimes you need to bridge a gap. So that's a bridge. It's often called a bridge loan, and it can be structured as a loan paid back on the funds being raised. Typically existing investors or founders might do the bridging. So bridging is typically bridging a gap of funding or just cash flow in the business. That's a bridge.
Okay. That is super valuable. I feel I have so many questions, and after you answer a question, I get another one. And so it's like an ongoing train there. But for me, that was all my buzzwords I wanted. Do you want to add something, Matt, to the conversation, or?
I mean, so just for everyone's knowledge, I have a document with 101 buzzwords that I've developed or found and discovered and researched over the years that I put into my book as well. There were 23 in my book. And if anyone has any wild ones that they've learned, because there are new buzzwords that emerge. I have a new buzzword actually. And this is a new one I discovered recently. Phygital. It's when an event is physical meets digital. It's when an event, and this is a really relevant one today, is that events are going online and physical events are transferring online. So there is going to be a blend in the future where events are both offline and online. And that's basically what we mean by phygital. When an event is both physical and digital. That's a new buzzword for you that I only discovered recently. Phygital.
Yeah, it's some new words that's been popping up lately. I recently figured out, or you told me, it's not the digital nomad is no longer like the hip
It's
word for
location
working.
independent. Location independent is the new digital nomad. It's true. I think the reason is because it's about time we reinvent certain terms and terminology, because digital nomad also carries connotations of influencers and negativity maybe. So location independent is, I think, a very good way to describe it, because a lot of people now can be location independent. If you are remote working for a company, you can travel and remote work, right? So remote work is the wrong term, because you're not remote. You're living in a city that's got Wi-Fi, that's fiber optic and all that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, those are some terms there.
I have another one, but it's not in the tech industry, but it's no longer called influencer. It's going over to being a creator.
Creator. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's great, Rufus. Beautiful.
Okay, so that is it for us. And if you have questions, please reach us out on Instagram or YouTube and comment sections. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Matt, what do you say to the lovely viewers?
To the lovely people, go check us out at LUNICORN on YouTube. We release content weekly about business topics, such as we've discussed today, as well as we'll be producing a new series soon about customer care, actually, which is brought to you all by the sponsor of our channel, Artender.io, the best Nordic customer care you'll ever find. Anyway, we'll link it below. They're a great supporter of what we do. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I think we're going to end this live now. Rufus, have a nice day, my man.
You too.
Ciao.
Bye.
Cheers, everyone.